Good morning, church. How are you guys? You guys doing good? Getting in the mood this morning? I had heard about two farmers that were talking one day, and as they were talking, they were crossing the cow field. And halfway across this pasture, Chris turned around and he noticed that his bull was approaching him very fast. And so he looked at his friend John and told John, he said, "Run." And John said, "Where?" And he said, "Anywhere but that way." So him and John headed across the field, and as they were getting closer and closer to the fence, Chris turned behind him and seen that the bull was catching closer and closer and knew that they probably wasn't going to make it. So he looked at John, he said, "John, lift up a prayer for us." John hollered back and he said, "Well, I don't know a prayer." And he said, "Well, just offer up anything." And he said, "Well, I do know one prayer." And Chris said, "Well, that'll be good enough." So John said, "God, for what we're about to receive, let us be thankful and blessed." I am thankful this morning and I am blessed this morning. It is a blessing to be with you guys this morning. I got the opportunity to be with you guys Wednesday, and for those that were here, we had a good time Wednesday, I believe, and I believe we did leave here blessed and hopefully a little bit stronger in the Word. I also heard that with two or more Baptists meet, a chicken has to die. I don't know if Mount Vernon has received that message, because I've been coming here off and on for the last probably month, 2 months, and I haven't had no chicken. But I don't think the pigs got the message, because I've sure had my share of bacon and ham and sausage, and what a blessing. What a blessing is to come and to be able to come into a church when you got Shoney's plugged in right next door. I mean, you can't ask for nothing better than that. It was awesome. While we're on this Old McDonald's theme, we've talked about the cow, talked about the chicken. So I'll just keep on with this until somebody starts singing the Old McDonald's song. But this morning, I want to talk to you guys about an ox. And some of you guys know what an ox is, and some of you guys don't. And if you don't know what an ox is, just picture a cow on steroids, okay? It's a beast, okay? It's one of the most powerful animals in the field, strong. And what they realized early in life, farmers, back when they didn't have equipment, the fancy equipment that they have now. In the spring, when they set out to farm the fields, they realized they had to take a plow, a set of discs. And they would have to go out in the fields, and they would take these discs, these plows, and they would tear up the fields. And the way they would tear up the fields is these discs would go across this field, across this hardened dirt, and those blades would dig in. And they would start to tear up the dirt. And they would take that hard dirt and they would turn it upside down. And they would get to the good part, the good soil. Well, here there was only one problem. They had to figure out what was going to pull these discs, these plows. So they looked to the most powerful thing they had. And that was an ox at the time. But see, they ran into a problem, because they knew that ox was powerful enough to get the job done. But they didn't know how they were going to control that ox. And so one day they came up with a tool. They came up with a yoke. Most of you guys know what a yoke is. It's just a wooden piece. And they would put it around an ox's neck. And see, what they realized is that this beast, this cow, this ox had the most powerful and had the power to do what they wanted to be done, but they had to control it. They had to get it under control if they were going to want it to do what they wanted. So at an early age in life, for this ox, these farmers would go out and they would put a yoke around its neck. And see, at first, this ox would think it would be no big deal. Yeah, it's not that comfortable, but it's okay. Yeah, it's probably not the best thing to have around my neck, but it's okay. I'll be all right. And this ox would grow up at a young age playing around with it, carrying it around his neck, swinging it around. And before that ox realized, that yoke became part of him. Before that ox realized, that yoke pretty well disappeared because he forgot about it. It wasn't that heavy no more. And as that ox got older and older, of course, he got bigger and bigger. And as he got bigger, he said, I got this thing. I've got this thing around my neck. I don't understand why they have it around my neck, but I still got it. See, what that ox didn't know, in a later age, that thing around his neck was going to control him, guys. That thing that he played around with in a younger age and an older age, it was going to control everything he done. The way he moved, the way he worked, everything about his life, that yoke was going to control him. See, my friends, if we're not careful, the devil put a yoke around our necks. And before you know it, he'll ruin, he'll control you, he'll destroy your life by that one yoke. By that one thing that you said at an early age, it's no big deal, I've got it, I can control this. In a later year, Satan's going to destroy you with it. A lot of us think, it's no big deal. I'll go to this party one time. I'll drink this one time. I'll try these drugs this one time. I'll look at that website one time. And the first time you look at it, you say, well, it's not that big of a deal. And then the next time you go back to it. And the next time, and the next time, and the next time. And you try to convince yourself, I'm not addicted to it. I'm not addicted to that alcohol. I'm not addicted to the drugs. I'm not addicted to the websites. I've got it. I can walk away from it anytime I want. It don't control me. I'll put it down right now. It's not that big of a deal. And that's exactly where Satan wants you. That's exactly what Satan wants you to think. It's no big deal. I've got it. And Satan's over here saying, yeah, you keep telling yourself that. You keep telling it's no big deal. Just look at it one more time. Try it one more time. And I'll slap that yoke around your neck so strong and so tight you'll never get away from it. You'll never be able to break free from it. And I'll control everything you do the rest of your life with that no big deal. I'll have you. I'll destroy your marriage with that one no big deal. I'll destroy your education. I'll destroy your future. I'll destroy any plans and any dreams you have with that one no big deal. Go ahead, look at it one more time. Go ahead, try it one more time, and I'll catch you. If you got your Bibles with me this morning, if you turn to John 10:10, John 10:10. Give you a second to turn there real quick. If you're in the book of Revelations, you went a little too far. Just back on up. John 10:10. Says a thief does not come except to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And I have come that they may have life, and they may have it more abundantly. That simple verse, those simple words that Jesus spoke, was some of the most powerful words that he could have spoke to you and me. Because what is right there in that simple scripture relates to each one of us in here. See, for a lot of us, picture this for a moment. Here's a man that's standing over here, and you got another man that's standing over here. And there's a line that's right in between us. And we step on this line right in the center. And over here you got a man named Jesus. Saying, come over. Come this way. I'll give you life. I'll give you a future. I got plans for you. Plans not to harm you. And over here you got another voice saying, no, don't listen to him. Come over here. I'll take care of you. And for me and you, and for a lot of people, we've stood right in the middle. And we've looked both ways. And the sad thing is, for a lot of us, and a lot of people, we've looked at the promises. We've looked at the good. And for whatever reason, we've decided to go this way. We've decided to go to somewhere where it says, you just come to me. Forget everything he's saying. Forget every promise that he has for you. Come to me and I'll destroy everything he's given you. Come to me and I'll take everything that he has plans. I'll take your future and I'll destroy it. Come over here. And we go that way, church. There's people that are still headed that way each day. Why do we go that way, church? Why do we look at something like this? Why do we hear the voice that says, come to me and I'll give you life. Come to me and I'll give you a future and a plan. And for some reason, we decide to go this way. I don't know about you, but for me, it was a yoke. It was something that Satan was able to put around my neck at an early age, and I didn't know it. And he tried to control my life. He tried to destroy my life. I grew up right outside of Gainesville, Florida, guys. I had two parents that I knew without a doubt they loved me. And I knew without a doubt they knew Scripture so good. Well, I think they knew one. And that was, if you spare the rod, you spoil a child. My parents knew that verse really, really good. My mom would whoop my butt. She'd whoop me for 3 days. And on the fourth day, she looked at me and she said, if you don't quit crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. I wanted so badly to look at her and say, well, what was the last 3 days all about? We grew up on a little farm, and my dad, we didn't have to worry about a switch or a paddle. My dad grew up on a farm, and man, he could tear you up with one of those 5-gallon feed buckets. Man, you couldn't get away from those things, man. I always told my dad, I said, if they would open up a feed bucket competition, throwing competition, you take the United States to the Olympics, I'm telling you. Man, I don't know what he had in that little flick of that wrist, but man, he could sling a feed bucket at you. Man, you'd be on the other side of the pasture, and you could say something that wasn't right, and man, you better be dunking, because here comes a feed bucket at your way. My parents didn't grow up in church, guys. As matters of fact, I couldn't remember the last time I ever seen my dad talk about church or go to church. I've been preaching for 11 years and never seen my dad in church. But my parents loved me. See, growing up every Sunday was a day that I didn't look forward to. Growing up, Sundays were the worst of it all. A lot of kids dread Mondays. I dreaded Sundays. Because my parents would get up every morning. They'd get us dressed, and they would drive by the church, and they would just drop us off at the front of the church, and they would just drive off. And after church, they would come back and pick us up. Never stepped foot in church with us. I grew up every Sunday I went to church. Every Sunday I was at church. Never missed it, guys. My parents wouldn't let me. Grew up in a small little Southern Baptist church, and I grew up to hate it, guys. I didn't understand everything about it. They didn't have a big youth group. They didn't have a lot of things going on. Just a old Southern Baptist church. Man, the pastor would get up every Sunday morning, and man, he just seemed like he was mad at everybody because he'd get up there and he'd just sounding like he was hollering and screaming all the time. And I just thought he was mad at all of us for everything we've done. And I knew what I have done in my life, and I understood why he screamed and hollered at us. And at an early age of 14, I started getting in a lot of trouble, guys. I started going down a road that I should have never went down. I started messing with things I should have never messed with. I started getting involved in things I should have never been involved with. I started hanging out with people I should have never hung out with. At age 14, I led a police chase through 3 different counties. At 16 years old, my parents told me the best news of my life, I thought, at that time. My parents told me at 16 years old, if you don't want to go to church no more, you don't have to. You've got your own vehicle. You got a job. So if you don't want to go to church, you don't have to go to church. That was the best news of my life at that time. I was like, man, I never have to go to church. And they said, you never have to go to church. We want you to go to church, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. I was like, man, that's like $1 million just handed to me right there. I quit going to church, guys. I needed to be at church. My life was falling apart. And at 16 years old, I left church with the quest never looking back, with the thought I'd never step foot in front of a church ever again. At age 16, I was shipped off. I was kicked out of every school in Clay County. I was shipped off to a boot camp, juvenile boot camp. I went through the juvenile boot camp, and I had got out, and when I had got out, my parents took me back, and they had called a meeting with the high school, and we met, and there was a long table there, and there was a bunch of guidance counselors around, and there was a new principal. The principal that was there the following year had left. He went on to another school, and so there was another principal that I never met, and he was sitting right at the end of the table, and all these guidance counselors were there, and of course they were the same guidance counselors that were there when they kicked me out of schools, shipped me off. And my parents were sitting there, and they were talking to the guidance counselors and trying to convince them to allow me to come back to school. They were trying to convince them, saying, you know, he's went to boot camp, he's done this, and he's done this, and he's changed. He's a lot better. And as I listened to my parents, I looked around and I listened to all these guidance counselors. And I heard them. And the whole time that my parents were trying to convince them that I was doing better, they just kept telling my parents, no. They said, why don't you try to get them a GED? On Wednesday night, there's classes. You can enroll them in there and let them get a GED and just start there. But we don't see him coming back to school. We don't see him coming back and not getting in trouble. We don't see him coming back and actually passing. Because if you look at his records, and they had a folder there, and they opened it up, and they said, if you look at his records, he's failing everything. He can't pass anything. And they said, so we just recommend that you would try to get him into a GED class. Start there. And one of the guidance counselors spoke up, and I'll never forget his words. And he says, if he doesn't wind up in prison first. And he looked at me and he said, boy, if you continue to do what you're doing, you ain't going to get a GED. You ain't going to have a life. Because your life's going to be behind bars for the rest of your life. And at that moment, the principal that I never met, he spoke up and he said, I want to talk to you and only you. And I looked at him and never met this guy before. And he said, if I allow you back into my school, he said, you got to promise me I'll never see you in my office. So my parents were right there, and I know how good my dad could throw a bucket. And so with every finger crossed and every toe crossed I could cross underneath that table, I looked at that principal and I said, I'll never see you in your office. I'll be good. I was lying, but I'll be good. And he said, you start Monday. And that was the end of the meeting, just like that. Monday come around, and Tuesday come around, and Wednesday I was in his office. I made it 3 days, guys. And I walked in his office, and he was sitting in his office behind his desk, and I had an old slip in my hand, and I walked in, and he looked right at me, and he said, what are you in here for? What are you in my office for? And so I laid the slip down on his desk, and he looked up at me, and he said, didn't I tell you I never want to see you in my office? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, what are you doing in my office? And I'm like, it's right there. I mean, it's on the paper. And he looked at the paper again, and he looked at me, and he said, I want you out of my office. Go back to class. Man, I had thought on the way to the principal's office, I thought I was over. Man, I was dreading going up there. I knew as soon as I got there and as soon as I seen him, he was going to pick up the phone and call my parents to come get me. I thought I was over, guys. And he said, go back to class. And I walked out of there wondering, what the heck is he thinking? What is this guy thinking? And I walked back to class, and when I got back to class, as soon as I walked in, the teacher looked at me and she said, I sent you to the office. And I said, yes, ma'am, you did. And I said, and he sent me back to you. And she didn't even believe me. I don't know why, but she wouldn't believe me. So she picked up the phone and had to call the principal herself, make sure I actually made it to his office. During that time, during that summer, right before school started, I had a good group of friends. And while I was at boot camp, they went off to camp. But they went off with their youth group. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to youth camp or been around teenagers that come back from youth camp. They're on fire, guys. They're on fire for God. And this is no different than this group of friends that I had. Man, they come back. And man, they were on fire for God. And when we grew up in our high school, man, we had different sections where you stood. And only you and your friends stood in that group. Okay, you didn't come in between us or anything else like that. You had your own little clique. And so I'm sitting there with our group, and man, and I remember the times that we had and all the stuff that we did that we shouldn't have done. But this year it had changed. Good friend of mine, Matt, he's standing there, and everywhere he went, man, he had his Bible, man. Literally walked around school with his Bible. We'd come over into the groups, and man, they'd start discussing youth group and discuss what's going on in church, and man, they were starting to have prayer meetings, and I'm like, man, what in the world is happening? And to the point, and every time they were around me, they kept saying, man, Tim, you need to come to church with us. You need to come be a part of this youth group. And I'm like, man, you've lost your minds. I said, I've done that most of my life. I said, I went to church. I grew up in church, guys. I'm not going back there. I know what they do, okay? I said, I'm not going. And they just wouldn't quit, man. They just continued and continued. And I just felt really uncomfortable every time we got in our group because, man, here they are, and they've got their Bibles, and they're praying, and I'm like, man, I'm not into that, okay? And Matt would not ever leave me alone. Me and Matt grew up. We were close friends, guys. And it got to the point one day, and I looked at Matt, and I said, Matt, I'm going to tell you one more time. If you ever mention church to me again, if you sit here and try to read your Bible to me or around me, we're done. Okay, our friendship's over. I can care less. Okay, I don't want no part of your God. I don't want no part of your church or nothing. I just want it to be like we used to be, man. He didn't care because he didn't give up. He kept telling me, and every time they had an event, every time they went to play paintball, and anytime they went to the bowling lane or they had a convention coming up, man, he would just continue, man, you got to come. We're going to play paintball. We're going bowling. And I said, I'm not coming. I was 17 at the time, and the strength team, and I don't know how many of you guys have seen the strength team, awesome group of people, awesome group of evangelists. They go all over the world, and they do these awesome things in the church, and they rip phone books in half, and they'll take a frying pan and make it look like a taco shell. They just do awesome kinds of things with strength. And at the end of their show, they always share a message, share the gospel. They were coming to Westside Baptist Church early November one year. And of course, my friend Matt, he's like, man, you got to come. It's going to be awesome. I'm like, listen, I'm not coming. They're like, listen, right afterwards, we're going to go to Westside. Afterwards, after the church thing, we're going to go bowling and we're going to have a good time and you need to come. And I said, I'm not coming. And they said, well, you know that girl Ashley that you've been trying to hook up with and try to date? And I said, well, yeah. And they said, well, she's going to be there. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm like, what do you mean she's going to be there? And they're like, she's coming. I'm like, she goes to church? And they're like, yeah, she goes to church. I said, man, I didn't know anybody that was good looking went to church. I said, when I grew up, it was just a bunch of old people. And they're like, man, you got to come. And I said, listen. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to the bowling lane. I'll just meet you there. You guys go do your church thing, okay? I'll just meet you there. And that first of that week, he just wouldn't let up. He just continued. One of them, they were talking about it, and one of my friends said, man, you're enjoying it. And they said, man, it's not like church, man. These guys come and they do all these different stunts and all these crazy things. And they said, man, I watched them in Jacksonville one day and at a church, and they lit the whole pulpit on fire as they did their event. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, they lit the church on fire? I said, now we're talking, okay? This is my group of people, okay? That was my mentality at the time. That's how much I hated church, guys. And they said, man, you got to come. I finally told Matt, I said, listen, I'll come. I said, but if they start to preach, I'm out. I said, I've heard the gospel. I've heard the message over and over. I don't want no part of it. And I said, if the man starts to speak, I'm gone. Matt said, okay. He said, just come. Westside Baptist Church in Gainesville, early November. I was 17 years old. We were sitting there and had all my friends with me. I was a pretty decent-sized guy back then. And of course, the girl I was trying to impress, she was there. And so I'm all standing there, and they come out. These giants guys come out, and they run up here, and they put on a show that's unbelievable, powerful. And right at the end, everyone kind of started cleaning up a little bit, and one of the guys had came out. He said, I just want to speak to you guys for a few minutes. Man, I immediately looked at Matt, and I said, you got to be kidding me. And Matt's like, man, it's about to be over. Just sit. And I just kind of leaned back in my chair and said, man, what in the world? Could care less what the guy was saying. And about halfway through his speech, guys, something started tugging in here. Next thing I know, I had tears coming down my eyes. And I had all my friends in the chairs right next to me, and I'm trying to clear them up. I'm trying to act big, trying to impress somebody, trying not to act like I'm crying. And they just continue to fall. And I couldn't stop them. And I remember the guys, he said, everyone stand up. And everyone stood up. And they started playing the song, Come As You Are. And he opened the altar. And man, I gripped onto that seat in front of me. And the whole time I was just crying. I could care less who was next to me. And I said, God, I don't know who you are. I don't know if you're real. I don't know if this is real. But I said, God, if this is real, I said, you got to give me a sign. You got to show me something, God, to let me know that you are real and that this is not fake. And I just got it off my lips, guys. My buddy Matt was sitting right here and my eyes were closed. And I felt his hand just reached over and touched me on the shoulder. 17 years old, guys, I fell to my knees. Because I just got it off my lips. And I said, God, if you're real, you have to show me. And Matt's hand touched my shoulder. And I looked up and I had tears everywhere. And man, they were all around me and they're like, man, you want to go up? I'll go with you. And I got up and I stepped out, guys, and I didn't walk. I ran. One of those big guys was standing right there, and man, I ran right to him, and he put his arms around me. And he said, what can I pray for you? What can I do for you this morning or this evening? And I said, I want to know that God that you keep talking about. I want to know about that love that you keep talking about. 17 years old, he led me to Christ at Westside Baptist Church in early November, guys. Afterwards, we went bowling, and if you've ever been around, like I said, about some teenagers, and man, one of you guys gets saved, or man, they're like, man, that was awesome, man, I'm so proud of you, and everything's going on, and we're just sitting there, and I'm trying to soak it in, guys. I'm trying to understand what just took place in my life. I'm trying to understand why in the heck did I ever even go to that place? Why was I there tonight? Why did I just go up and accept someone that I thought I hated so much? And Matt was right there, and I looked at Matt, and I said, Matt, I want to tell you something. And he said, what's that? I said, God's used you tonight. And he said, what do you mean? I said, Matt, I don't know what happened. I don't know if God spoke to you and God told you. I don't know. But I said, I was sitting there and I was praying. And I said, I told God right there. I said, God, if you're real, you have to show me. God, if you're real, you have to give me a sign. And I said, Matt, I don't know if God told you right then or what. But I said, at that moment, I said, you reached out and you touched me on my shoulder. And I said, that's when I dropped to my knees, Matt. Matt looked at me and he said, Tim, I never touched you, brother. And I looked at him, I said, don't mess with me. I said, you touched me. And he said, I never touched you, Tim. Me and Matt's good friends, and we're still good friends, guys. And still today, he swears up and down he never touched me that night at Westside Baptist Church. I got up and left that night. I didn't even play. I got up and I left in anger because I thought Matt was lying to me. I said, man, don't play. And I went home. And I went in my bedroom and I shut the door, guys. And I got down on my knees. And I started my relationship with God. That Sunday, I showed up at the church, to their church. Showed up to a youth group, and I walked in. And for the first time in my life, I actually experienced what a youth group is all about. And it was just a great atmosphere. It was awesome. It was fun. The youth pastor spoke the word. And afterwards, we're just kind of hanging out. And I walked over, and there was a wall, and on this wall was a big circle. And in this circle, there was a couple sticky notes. And on those sticky notes, it had people's names. And I looked at that wall, and my name was on a sticky note in the middle of this circle. And I asked a couple of them, I said, why is my name on a sticky note in the middle of a circle on the wall in your youth group? And they said, well, see, our youth pastor told us that he was going to draw a circle on the wall. And that anybody that we know at our school that was lost, that was on the wrong path, that was unchurched, that needed a Savior. I want you to put their name on a sticky note, and I want you to place it on their wall. And I want you to, every time you walk in this youth group, I want you to know, and I want you to see that name, and I want you to pursue them like you've never pursued them before. I want you to pray for them like you've never prayed before until they come to Christ. And right there, guys, I realized that they were real. Wednesday night, we talked about real or fake. They were real, guys. And I thought back, and I said, how long has my name been up there? And I said, for the last 3 months, we've been praying about you. And the youth pastor was standing there, and he said, actually, Matt, put your name up there. And right there, and it hit me, and I could remember all those times that Matt continued to talk me into going to church. All those times that we met, and he would just start praying or read his Bible to me or tell me something that was going on. To the point where I told him, listen, you're about to end our relationship. You're about to end our friendship if you mention his name one more time. If you mention church one more time around me, it's over. He was willing to throw his friendship away because he was going to be real and pursue me like never before. He was going to pray for me like never before. I went back to school, and guys, at that moment, it changed my life forever. I went back to school, and I was failing everything, guys. I was in trouble. I never seen my senior year in school because I was able to graduate in the 11th grade. The only time I talked to the principal ever again was at my graduation ceremony when he handed me my diploma. Guys, God took my life and he turned it right side up. I never thought I'd make it through school. I never thought I would pass everything, guys. In my life, I thought I was stupid, guys. I thought I was a failure. I thought, man, my life must be over. And it wasn't, guys. The devil was just sitting there destroying it. The devil was sitting there destroying and stealing everything of mine. Everything that our God has promised me and you. Somewhere in my life, I took the step to the devil. I took that yoke. I allowed him to put that yoke around my neck. And I walked away from everything. And I watched it destroy my life for years. Till one day at Westside Baptist Church where I said, enough's enough. Well, I said, you know what? I'm not a failure. You know what? I am somebody. And I gave it all back to him. Prince O'Bolin, we're still good friends. He's actually on my Facebook. He's actually a good mentor of mine. We talk from time to time, and I was able to preach at his church quite a bit as a guest speaker, and just we grew a good relationship. And one time I was sitting there talking to him, and I said, I want to ask you a question. And he said, what's that? I said, do you remember the first day I ever met you? I said, we came in with my parents, and he said, yeah. He said, we were sitting there, and we was talking about you coming back to school. I said, yeah. I said, I want to ask you a question. I said, everyone in that room, I said, even I believe my parents didn't believe in me at that time. I said, why did you believe in me? Why did you give me a chance? And he said, Tim, he said, honest truth, he goes, I was sitting there, and I was listening to everything that was going on. And he goes, and I just prayed. And I said, God, should I give this young man another chance? And he said, honest truth, he goes, I felt like God told me to give him a chance. He goes, I got a plan for his life. Let him in. And he said, in the day, and I didn't even bring it up, and he said, the day, he said, I think it was the next day. And I said, no, it was 3 days. I made it 3 days. Give me those 3 days. He said, well, I remember you came back in my office. And he said, I sent you back to class. And he goes, and I remember praying. I said, God, I hope I heard you clear. I hope I heard you loud and clear. And he said right then, he goes, I felt like God said, give him a chance. Give him a chance. I've got a plan for his life, guys. Guys, I don't stand here and tell you this to boast about myself. I don't want to tell you all the things that I have done. Because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today. If it wasn't because he loved us so much. If it wasn't because 2,000 years ago he went to the cross to make something. To show his love. Not only for me, but for you guys. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world, guys, that he sent his only son. Yet we were still sinners. Yet we were still mess up, guys. Yet we were still making mistakes. Yet we were still walking in this direction. God said, I love you so much. I've got a plan for your life. You're going to be somebody one day. You're going to do something for me one day. Guys, I don't know where you're at in your walk. But I bet you if I go around this room, I bet there'll be, most of you guys could stand up and give a testimony. Tell something what God has done for your life. But I bet you it started with a yoke. I bet you somewhere in your life, you've got off the wrong path. I pray that most of you guys have found the right path and have turned and started in the right direction. Some of you guys might not have even turned. Some of you guys still might be headed in that wrong direction. Some of you guys are here this morning still trying to break that yoke from your neck. Still trying to get rid of that yoke from your neck. The thing that has destroyed you. Some of you guys are here this morning and you brought your kids to church hoping that they don't get in a yoke. Some of you guys here that got teenagers in this youth group are praying that they don't get around a yoke. Guys, wherever you guys are at, the most important thing is you're here this morning. You're headed in the right direction. Where you end up, it's up to you. It's your road. God doesn't just drag us in his way. He gives it to you. He said, I give you life. Now make something out of it. Do something with your life. I gave you my son 2,000 years ago. Do something with him. As they begin to play, as they begin to come, guys. This morning, again, I don't know where you're at.